People who have seen nice people finally snap. What happened? Before we start, welcome back to Reddit Stories Hub. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Here we'll be telling you interesting, thought-provoking stories from Reddit. So get comfortable and let's jump right in. Story 1. I had just started high school and there was a new kid. I was from a one primary, one high school town, so all the kids already knew each other. He was a giant Aboriginal kid who was quiet with no friends. So my friend and I befriended him. We always chatted to him, and he was so lovely, always softly spoken, and generally just so nice. Like holding doors open for us and bashfully smiling when we would go out of our way to be friendly to him. Anyway, he started getting picked on by the bad boy of our grade relentlessly. One day he snapped and beat him up with a garbage can and was expelled, and I never saw him again. Story 2. My older brother's wedding. He's a very nice guy, almost too nice. He had a horrible girlfriend. He adored her, though. She told him that he wasn't good enough and that she would break up with him unless he bought her this super fancy ring and married her. He did. His wedding was very stressful and she was extra nasty. After they cut the cake, she got herself a huge slice and left him with none, telling him he should go on a diet. For context, he was underweight. He was working his way up to average. He snapped, threw a handful of cake at her pretty dress and hair, then told her to expect divorce papers to sign. He proceeded to scream, cry, and rant about how horrible she was and how she made him wanna out himself. He's better now. They split up and live in different continents. Story 3. When I was in high school, my group of like 6 friends were sitting at a round table in the cafeteria for breakfast. A table over, some girls had been tossing small chunks of their food in our direction. My one friend, M, wore her hair in an unusual spiked-up style, and I guess the girls at the table were trying land food in her hair while cackling to themselves. Q, my quiet, sweet, introverted friend, K, getting so angry I swear steam was coming out of her ears. One of the girls had thrown a decent-sized piece of her egg patty at us, and it landed on the floor near K's foot. K proceeded to step on the egg patty, pick it up off the ground, walk over to the table of bullies, and shove the egg directly into the mouth of the one who had thrown it. This was such an amazing moment in my high school memory. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, as Kay was the last person I would have expected to do that. Of course, she did get in trouble, but she didn't regret it one bit. Story 4. This woman, Mary, I worked with, was always pleasant and cheerful, said hello in the lunchroom, and was generally liked. She worked in finance in special projects. She said she wanted to retire in a few years, and she had been working there for 15 years. Her boss started pressuring her to complete our annual budget report faster, but this thing is huge and comprehensive and a figurative beast. Mary told the boss it would be ready in a couple of weeks, per the usual schedule. The boss said that it needed to be completed within 1 week to give to the higher-ups. Mary said it wasn't possible. The boss emailed a bunch of co-workers and the assistant managers titled Mary, calling Mary out for a poor work ethic and for making the department look bad. Mary said it wasn't possible and didn't appreciate being bullied. She put in her notice to retire by the end of the week, leaving her boss high and dry. She was the only one who could do the budget report in a timely manner, so the department was double screwed. Good for her. Story 5. My best friend had lost his mom to murder a few months prior when we were in the 10th grade. Somehow, he had pulled himself together just enough to start going back to school. I don't know how he handled it, with being an only child and growing up without a father. His mom was all he had. A kid that thought he was popular, that got on everyone's nerves cracked wise to my friend's face about his mom's death. What he said isn't exactly sure. My friend threw him on the ground and punched him in the face multiple times. The end result was a broken nose, a broken left orbital, and my friend got kicked out of school. We were very grateful he taught him a lesson, but saddened it had to come at such a high cost. Story 6. She was an assistant manager and was known for being soft-spoken. At a manager's meeting, one of the general managers, who was known for being a total jackass to everyone, was going off on how every store should be run. Well, she snapped, you have the highest turnover rate out of any store in the district. You can't keep employees for more than 6 months before they just quit saying you were the problem. Maybe you should take that advice you're giving us and use it on yourself. She put in her 2 weeks not even 3 days later. The manager who she yelled at was transferred to a different location out of that district. The store he managed has since bounced back and has been doing very well. Story 7. One of my teachers in high school was the calmest dude. Never yelled, never told kids off, would just laugh and smile and wait for us all to calm down and then continue with his teaching. One day, we must have been particularly rowdy, and we weren't calming down like we usually did. He couldn't get a word in edgeways. I could see him getting increasingly frustrated, and eventually he just bellowed, "Shut up!" And the entire class was shocked into silence. He never had to do it again. Story 8. I was chilling at a friend's house as a kid. His dad was the chill nicest guy. That day, my friend's mom, also super nice, was across the street talking to the neighbor about something that I can no longer recall. Neighbor was one of those guys who never respected common etiquette. Music blaring, parking his shitty boat in front of other people's house, cars parked on the lawn. The neighbor started screaming at the mom, and we all went out on the stoop to see what was happening. As soon as we got outside, the guy called my friend's mom a cunt. Well, my friend's dad heard that and went full Hulk mode. He ran screaming across the street and just fucking decked the guy and crouched over him, shouting warnings and threats. Took a while for his wife to calm him down. I don't think any of them had ever seen him react to something in that way. Maybe even the dad himself. Story 9. Worked as a line cook with a chef who I became really good friends with. Really chill dude, easygoing, and actually super fun to cook with. He taught me most of what I know about cooking, and I owe him a lot for my success. Never really saw him get mad until one day we were getting slammed during busy night, and one of the servers said something that really ticked him off. Not sure if I ever heard what it was, but next thing I knew, he had sent the deep fryer basket flying at Mach 1 across the kitchen, nearly missing the dish kit and shattering a light bulb. He stormed off, and 5 minutes later, after a smoke break, came back and casually continued cooking, as if nothing had happened. He apologized about it the next day, and we never talked about it again. The restaurant industry is a stressful place. Story 10. I used to see this woman in my building every day, very friendly. We always checked on each other's lives. We had lunch a few times over the years. It was friendly to a certain degree. A couple years passed. She was much older than me. One day, riding the elevator, she told me that she was saying goodbye. I said I was sorry to see her go and asked why. She said she was retiring that day. I asked if her office was throwing a party or if she was celebrating. She turned to me and her face contorted into an image of rage. She clenched her teeth and said she didn't tell anyone in her office, including her bosses. She only told the HR person last week. This was her last day and she was never returning to see or talk to anyone in her office again. Story 11. I used to do seasonal work sorting tax returns, like 500 people in a warehouse-sized room sorting through returns, stacking them in boxes, etc. This one guy on my team, huge dude, a gentle giant, really nice. Suddenly one day he smashes the table he's working at, then flips a big box full of paperwork. It flew over my head and 20 feet away. He threw the table out of his way, then stormed out. Turns out he was getting his paycheck garnished for something or other. Story 12. One of my middle school friends, whom we'll call Bob, was about a half-foot shorter than everyone else. Everyone was around 5 feet. He was an interesting, in a good way, dude. Interested in learning, played video games, was great to hang out with. But he looked scrawny. Didn't look like he could hurt anything, if I'm being honest. For some context to the story, our gym teacher was an asshole. Gave nicknames, some good, some bad, to everyone. He was always sarcastic, always berating everyone, speaking down to us instead of encouraging them. One day, the gym teacher says something about Bob's mom, which Bob's mom had fibromyalgia and some other conditions making her weak and unhealthy, not by choice. And something in Bob snapped. Bob completely took down this 6.5 feet monster gym teacher. The gym teacher looked like he stood no chance at that time. They were quickly pulled apart, and Bob got expelled and had to move school while the gym teacher was fired for fighting a student and being an overall asshole. Story 13. Guy I'd worked with for about 10 years, never could get ahead at work. Wasn't bad, but just didn't really excel. He was always kind, always ready to laugh and crack a joke. Never saw or heard him be mean, but apparently him and his wife were having some trouble, though I'd not heard him talk about it much. But one day, while his youngest was out at church with a family member, he flipped out and shot his wife, then himself. Story 14. A lady where I used to work was subjected to constant sexual harassment by a much older coworker, and the company failed to do anything about it. He was showing up at her house, eventually forcing her to move house. After she moved into the new house, he bought the house next door. She arrived to work with a baseball bat and stopped at reception to ask if Tom was in. When they asked why, she calmly told them she was there to kill him. She walked upstairs to his office. Reception called ahead and had him take the fire escape, and she instead demolished his office until the police arrived. She was not charged. The company and police knew she had announced her intentions to reception as a cry for help, so she didn't actually find him, because it was clear that if she had found him, she would have killed him. She took some sick leave and eventually returned to work, and the company put her on a project with this guy as her manager, because screw protecting victimized women, right? Story 15. My 7th freaking trip to the DMV when trying to reinstate my license. Every single time they scrutinized my paperwork and always managed to find something wrong and would send me away to fix it. On this 7th trip, they finally resorted to, "You have no proof that you ever had a license." Despite my piles of paperwork showing my driving record, among other things, I refused to leave the seat and said, "You people are freaking monsters." A manager was called. We argued. He said he believed that I had had a license, but there was just no proof, and he couldn't risk accepting my paperwork in case someone checked it. I said I refused to leave the seat until I knew exactly what was needed. Manager said, "Tell you what, I can contact and could get a verification that I had had a license there. It would take 3 minutes. That's when I yelled in the DMV, "Why wasn't that the first freaking thing you said?" Anyway, I got my license back. Story 16. Working in an auto parts warehouse, one of our managers was a very quiet, collected person. One particular day, some of the orders were wrong and the ordering system was malfunctioning. He calmly goes out back, starts up a forklift, and rams it full speed at a huge stack of wood pallets. He must have thrown it in reverse and repeated this about a dozen times, raising and lowering the forks appropriately. Everyone stopped working to watch as every last pallet was destroyed. When there was only a pile of wood scraps left, he turned off the lift and calmly walked back in and continued working as if nothing happened. Story 17. Gym class in high school. The quiet, nerdy kid kept getting picked on during dodgeball. One jerk kept hitting him with balls even when he was already out. The quiet kid wasn't tiny. He was about average-sized, maybe a little taller than average. He eventually lost his temper, ran across the court, and literally delivered a double-handed chokeslam to the jerk. Being a bunch of teenage boys, we all lost our shit cheering for him. He got suspended for 3 days, but it was reduced to 1 day in school after a bunch of us went to the principal and explained the circumstances. Story 18. I worked with this theater director who was well known for being one of the nicest and most intelligent people you can meet. But there was one actor in this show who was a grade A pain in the asshole. She would constantly be late for rehearsals once she didn't show up at all. The reason was her girlfriend was in a car accident, but the problem was she didn't tell the stage manager, director, or anyone she wasn't coming. We found out through Facebook. This was a show with some deaf cast members and some hearing actors who didn't know ASL had to do some signing. So we brought in an ASL instructor. This woman, though, did know some ASL and thought she knew better than the college professor and would constantly try to correct her. We were doing space rehearsal in one of our touring spaces with very limited time. This is 2 months into the rehearsal process, and the director has finally had enough of her having a backhanded comment for everything. He adjusts her blocking slightly, just because the space we're in is a bit different. She starts to say something, and the director just screams, "The show isn't about you, goddammit!" And he throws his script to the ground so that pages fly everywhere. It's the first time any of us have ever heard him yell or curse in anger. She runs off stage crying. Then he calmly says, "Can we get back to work, please?" And then later, during a break, I overhear him talking to her about how he is going to tell everyone he knows in theater never to hire her or work with her. Story 19. I knew a girl who was living with a guy who had a severe anger management issue. He had kept it under control for the few years they had lived together, but one day he snapped over some minor issue, hit her repeatedly, banged her face in the concrete, and tried to choke her until a passerby stopped him. So, obviously the relationship was over, and she was going to fetch her stuff from the apartment. She, likewise, obviously didn't want to go alone, so me, 2 other friends, and her brother, who I also knew, tagged along to keep things in check and to help carry stuff. When we arrive, her ex gives us attitude, which causes her normally extremely mild and docile brother to snap completely. He smacked the guy up against the wall with one hand and punched him repeatedly with the other, holding him up against the wall all the time, because you don't hit someone who is down. We just stood there in shock and awe. Given the way the girl looked after the beating she had received, black and blue, bruised, her entire face scraped, choke marks around the neck, and so on. We didn't mind much what was going on, and just let him punch him out. Then, we got our stuff and left as he started to wake up. 2 times during the following months, the ex was jumped twice when moving outdoors in the evening. I don't know who did it, and I don't want to know. I guess everybody has their trigger. Story 20. In healthcare, you get yelled at a lot for stupid stuff. Where's my ginger ale? F that doctor. He's an a-hole for taking too long, etc. But one patient crossed the line. She didn't like that I called the previous hospital she was at the night before to get her records so I could see what was done. Completely legal. Done all the time, so things aren't missed or repeated unnecessarily. And yes, she signed a release so we could do it. She then came out of her room and threw a full styrofoam cup of her urine at me. Dodged it by a millimeter, but it ruined a computer monitor. She then said, "Bitch, I'ma leave here and F up your family." Done. Shit lost. Screamed for security and personally put her back in her room with the help of every tech and nurse in the emergency department. 4 points restrained her for her out-of-control behavior that was a danger to the staff and called the police. Once we got the records from the previous hospital, we found out she pulled the same act to a lesser degree the night before. After she was medically cleared, the police took her to jail, and my final words to her were, "Good luck in the clink. They love the urinators there." She was charged with battery and given jail time for that and multiple parole violations. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.